Embedded in Shinran Shonen's masterwork called The True Teaching, Practice, and Realization is a gem of a poem. Let's call it a poem or a set of verses. I believe it's referred to as the Shoshinge, but here it's entitled Hymn of True Shinjin and the Nembutsu. And it's on page 69, or it starts on page 69 of this wonderful volume called The Collected Works of Shinran. I think I've recommended this to you before as a great resource that also is volume 1 of a 2-volume set, the second volume of which has commentaries on Shinran's writings. And Shinran Shonen, of course, as almost all of you probably know who are listening to this video, was the founder of the Jodo Shinshu branch of Pure Land Buddhism. And, he lived in around the 13th century Japan and came up in terms of his own training in the Tendai school, which was based on the Lotus Sutra. Al Bloom did an interesting piece, Dr. Al Bloom, on the question of why Shinran doesn't mention the Lotus Sutra more, and that's someplace else on my channel, probably under the playlist of Dr. Al Bloom. But that being neither here nor there, I want to focus on this hymn, what he calls Hymn of True Shinjin and the Nembutsu. And the way Shinran starts is he says, he expresses his own faith, so to speak, through these words. I take refuge in the Tathagata of immeasurable life. And that would be Amitayus. That term, Amitayus, refers to Amida Buddha, who is the Buddha of immeasurable life. And there we have reference to chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra, where it is revealed, actually, that Shakyamuni Buddha, in the case of the Lotus Sutra, has a life that is eternal. Now, I've mentioned before, and probably this is not very orthodox, but I think of chapter 16 in the Lotus as also referring to Amida Buddha, since he is referred to as the Buddha of immeasurable life. And Shinran goes on to say, I entrust myself to the Buddha of inconceivable light. And of course, that's the other name of Amida Buddha, which is Amitabha, or Buddha of infinite light. And these two attributes, light representing wisdom and life representing compassion, are the two key attributes of Buddhahood in general and of Amida Buddha in particular. And here where he says taking refuge, that of course is one of the main things that we Buddhists do when we become Buddhists, is we take refuge. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, namely in the Buddha, who is the founder, or also we can think of it as Amida Buddha in this case, and also the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, and finally the Sangha, or the community of followers of Buddhism. And where he says, I entrust myself, that in many authors' opinions is the best way to think about this word Shinjin, which is in the title of these hymns, where it says Hymn of True Shinjin, or Shinjin. That, rather than the word faith, since that has many connotations in terms of Christianity and other religions, most Pure Land Buddhists or Jodo Shinshuists like to think of Shinjin as better translated to mean entrusting. So we entrust in the Buddha. We entrust in the Buddha of inconceivable light. And then Shinran offers a few lines to reference the narrative, the mythopoetic narrative that's at the core of our Jodo Shinshu entrustment or faith, and is derived from the teachings within the larger Sukhavati Sutra, or the larger Pure Land Sutra, where, as Shinran says here, Bodhisattva Dharmakara, in his causal stage, under the guidance of Lokesvara Raja Buddha, searched into the origins of the Buddha's pure lands and the qualities of those lands and their human beings and devas. He then established the supreme incomparable vow. He made the great vow rare and all-encompassing. So we have then this bodhisattva, or in some cases referred to as a bhikshu, a fellow who was a king, supposedly, and who converted to Buddhism. And within his realm and his time and his era, the main Buddha, so to speak, was this Buddha Lokesvara Raja. And so we refer, or he refers to Dharmakara as being in his causal stage, in that he's in the stage of development where he's not yet a Amida Buddha. He later becomes a Amida Buddha. That's the way this story evolves or unfolds, is him becoming a Amida Buddha. But in any case, what did he do? He searched into the origins of the Buddha's Pure Lands because he wanted to find the best land. There's a notion that all the Buddhas in the universe, in the vast universe of the 10 directions, that they each have a Buddha field. And so Dharmakara wanted to check out all of these fields and find the best qualities in each of them in order to create his own Buddha land or Buddha field. So he searched into the origins of the Buddha's Pure Lands and the qualities of those lands and their human beings and devas. He then established the supreme incomparable vow. And of course, that's the 18th of the 48 vows that he made in the presence of Lokasvara Raja, where he basically vowed that anybody who has trust in him and who orients their thinking toward him, perhaps saying his name, which is Amida Buddha, only once, would then have the opportunity to be born in his Pure Land as a Buddha once he became Amida Buddha, but that he would not become Amida Buddha unless that vow could be fulfilled. So the way we know that the vow was fulfilled is the fact that he did become Amida Buddha. And again, this is where he outlines the fact that birth in his land is available to everybody. It's a non-discriminatory kind of thing. And really, there are very few requirements other than orienting oneself to the feeling and confidence that this vow has the power to accomplish what he had articulated in the vow. So he established the supreme incomparable vow. He made the great vow rare and all-encompassing. And it's rare and all-encompassing because of its minimal requirements for rebirth, for achieving a state of non-retrogression. That's what we can attain in this life, according to Shin Buddhism, is we can't become Buddhas in this life because we're filled with blind passions. But what we can do is we can attain a state of non-retrogression by virtue of this entrusting that we do in Amida. And of course, even in the context of, our entrusting, it's not that, we are having faith in Amida as much as that he endows to us and embeds within us that sense of entrusting. So it's really a gift that we can take no credit for whatsoever. So then it goes on to say, in 5 kalpas of profound thought he embraced this vow, then resolved again that the name be heard throughout the 10 quarters. So the name, his name, which we Jodo Shinshuists, articulate as Namu Amida Butsu, which means I take refuge in Amida Buddha, we think of that as the Nembutsu, or the name. And recall now that the title of this hymn is Hymn of True Shinjin, which we talked about in terms of entrusting, and the Nembutsu, which is this name. So he resolved that the name be heard throughout the 10 quarters. So he endowed the virtues associated with his own meritorious activities. He endowed them in this name that he gifts to us, and that as we express it as a result of his influence on us, that assures us rebirth in his Pure Land when we die, and also allows us to experience a state of non-retrogression as far as the fact that, we can't any longer and shouldn't any longer have any worries about sort of regressing into an earlier spiritual phase. In fact, what he says someplace in here is that we are actually equivalent at that point of Maitreya Bodhisattva, who is the Bodhisattva who is designated to be the next Buddha in our Saha world here on this earth, who also then is sort of one step removed from Buddhahood. And by our entrusting in this vow, this rare vow, we are merely one step away from becoming Buddha. Namely, when we die, that's what we attain, and then we have the capability, according to Shinran, to come back to this world and express our compassion in ways that we weren't previously able to do while we're in this life filled with blind passions. So he gave this 5 kalpas. A kalpa is a long, long time, like an eon. He gave 5 kalpas of profound thought. He embraced this vow, and he resolved that the name be heard. Now, how is the name going to be heard throughout the 10 directions? Well, part of how it's going to be heard, and we'll hear about this in another part of the scripture, is that he vowed that all the Buddhists in the universe, all those myriad of millions and quadrillions of Buddhas, that they would all embrace and recite his name, so that all the Buddhas in the universe are on the same page as far as focusing in on this particular Buddha and this particular vow as being the best insofar as its capability of helping relieve suffering and generating spiritual progress for beings who have no necessarily particular knowledge, no necessarily particular self-power oriented practices that they can perform, but who have entrusted in the vow. That's the essence of it. They've heard the vow. Amita's gifted the vow to them. They express it through the name, Namo Amida Butsu. And they do that expression merely as an expression of gratitude. So there really is no practice. And that's the sort of the ironic or paradoxical kind of aspect of Shin Buddhism that, is perhaps a turnoff to some people who are into Buddhism, who think that, all these various practices are necessary. Now, that doesn't mean that, a person who's oriented toward this form of Pure Land Buddhism should think to themselves, "Hey, that's great. I'm already saved. I already have entrusted in the vow, and therefore I can do whatever I want." It's not like that, because as Shinran said in his Tani Show, which is it's a great book, a great read if you want to get a hold of a copy of that small volume. He said, just because there's an anecdote doesn't mean you should take a poison. So it's not the case that a person can sort of, through some kind of contrivance of feeling that because the vow is there and is made even for the person who has evil actions, that therefore one should go out and commit evil actions. That's not the nature of this religion or this vow or this form of Buddhism. So it goes on to say that everywhere the Buddha casts light, immeasurable, boundless, unhindered, unequaled, light, Lord of all brilliance, pure light, joyful light, the light of wisdom, light constant, inconceivable, light beyond speaking, light surpassing sun and moon, and illuminating countless worlds. And so this light, this wisdom, this gift, it permeates all. And I would refer you here to some of the recent verses that I've been uploading from Tan Wan, who talks about the Buddhist light with various kinds of sort of hyperbolic characterizations. And so the bottom line here is that the multitudes of beings all receive this radiance. So all of us have this light shining upon us, although we can't always see it because of the cloud of ignorance, which is the third of the three poisons. We have this sort of way of dualistically thinking that keeps us from really experiencing ultimate reality in its true form. And so we don't necessarily see the light in its full brilliance, but nevertheless it shines upon us, and it does filter through, if you will, in the form of our having been gifted this experience of entrusting in the vow, and our expressing of the Nembutsu, or the name, as a way of expressing gratitude for that gift. So just to state another line or two from this hymn of true Shinjin and the Nembutsu, he says, Shinran does, "The name embodying the primal vow is the act of true settlement. The vow of entrusting with sincere mind is the cause of birth. We realize the equal of enlightenment and supreme nirvana through the fulfillment of the vow of attaining nirvana without fail." So the name Namo Amida Butsu embodies the primal vow, which is what has the power to save us. And that's the act of true settlement, that when we take advantage of this gift, we are truly settled in the state of non-retrogression. We can't backslide at that point. And that vow of entrusting with sincere mind is the cause of birth, meaning the cause of birth in the Pure Land when we die. His Pure Land that, remember, he created on the basis of having analyzed all these various Buddha lands and pulled together the best of all the characteristics in order to create this land of happiness or land of bliss, which is what it's referred to and what the word, I believe, Sukhavati means. This land of great joy. And in that sense, we can feel confident that whatever steps and phases we need to go through, or that we do go through between now in this Saha world, in this world of dukkha, through the period of time that we may experience old age, sickness, and ultimately death, that at that point, in terms of the afterlife, we can be assured that we will be in that pure land and will be able to have the benefits of all of its wonderful characteristics as described in the sutras. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots.